नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि, धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, संघं शरणं गच्छामि, द्वितीयंपि बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि, द्वितीयंपि धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, द्वितीयंपि संघं शरणं गच्छामि, तृतीयंपि बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि, तृतीयंपि धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, तृतीयंपि संघं शरणं गच्छामि। पाणातिपाता वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समाधियामि, अदिन्नदाना वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समाधियामि, कामे सुमिच्छाचारा वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समाधियामि मुसावादा वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समाधियामि सुरामेरयमज्जपमादिठाणा वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समाधियामि सब्बपापस्य अकरणं कुशलस्य उपसम्पदा सचित्तपरियोदपणम् एतं बुद्धान शासनम् साधु साधु साधु.
I'm very happy to offer a few reflections in response to the different questions that people have written down. And so I'll do my best to respond to these. Please don't take my answers as definitive or the only perspective on these issues, questions, but these are offered for consideration, for reflection. The first question is, what could be the most skillful way to help those who might feel anxious or scared by the current conditions? Thank you. The first thing that comes to mind with respect to that is to be looking at your own mind state and to be, say, reflecting on how you feel about the conditions before we jump in and try and help other people and make others feel kind of okay, or to be encouraging or comforting. It's good to see where we're coming from. And my experience is that if somebody is very anxious or upset or angry, and if I am able to manifest the qualities of peacefulness, of being attentive, being receptive, and not being reactive or say, stirred up within myself, then that has a calming and say, encouraging effect on the other person or other people. So I think it's also important to be honest and to be realistic. The Buddha Dhamma is a teaching that doesn't just sort of console, like giving a child a sort of, oh, don't worry, dear, it'll all be all right, kind of advice. It's not giving a false hope, or say giving giving out words or feelings that are there just to make someone feel better in the short term. And I feel that it's one of the things that sometimes people have criticized the Buddha's teaching, particularly Theravada Buddhism, the Buddhism of the southern world. That it isn't don't worry, everything will be all right. It's don't worry, everything will be all right if you do the right thing. If you don't do the right thing, it won't be all right. It's a demanding teaching as well as an encouraging one. So, and I feel that's part of its strength. Its realism, its honesty, and so that that if you're trying to be encouraging or comforting or being with someone who's scared, being honest and being realistic doesn't necessarily mean being brutal. Doesn't mean being uncaring or harsh. But I feel that it can be even a greater cruelty to give people false hope. So that don't worry, I'm sure you're going to get better. It's like it might be, I hope you're going to get better, but I'm not sure. And I feel that if we are mindful and really attuned to the conversation, the actual engagement that is there between ourselves and another person, whether it's someone who we live with or someone in the family, someone who's a visitor, someone that we just happen to meet. If we are mindful and that there is an attunement to the time, the place, the situation, then the skillful words will come to us. The appropriate and useful response will come to us. So sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, they'll not at this particular time in previous months or years, and they say, "Oh, I've been diagnosed with this illness. I'm going to be all right, aren't I?" Or tell me it's going to be okay, isn't it, Ajahn? And I will say to them, well, to be honest, I don't know that it's going to be okay or that you will recover. And it might be challenging to hear that, but it's more helpful in the long run to be realistic. And the Buddha's way, the Buddha's teaching encourages us to come from that place of realism, so that we have those 5 subjects of frequent recollection. I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to sicken, I am of the nature to die. On a personal level, those are quite challenging or threatening. Like, no, I don't want to hear that. But the Buddha is encouraging us to reflect in that way in order to support that quality of realism that, yeah, we're aging, we're subject to sickness and death. That's not an accident. That's the way nature works. It's not something that's gone wrong. That's how life is. And so it's challenging to rise up to that, but in the long run, that can be something that's more helpful and more beneficial for people. So I think a mixture of both being fully at ease and calm and receptive within yourself, and also being realistic and as honest and helpful in the way that you speak and what you say to others. These are ways that we can be most effectively comforting and helpful in meeting those emotions of fear and disturbance and confusion. I'm not good at short answers. Excuse me if I go on a bit. So the next question is, many of the preventative measures being taken at the moment seem to be dividing people from each other. How can people living both inside and outside the monastery maintain an attitude of generosity, kindness, and harmony, and avoid selfishness, aversion, and distrust, especially when people are being asked to stay apart from each other? So this is a very good question, I feel, very pertinent to this time. The British government, I think right now, today, is setting in place even more strict recommendations or rulings about people to stay home, to keep out of close contact with each other, to maintain social distances and such like. So this is a very significant issue. I think there's both the question of how we relate to each other mentally as well as physically, and that part of the issue is if we are separated from each other, that and that the people aren't allowed to visit or can't come and spend time here, or people are separated from their families. There is the say very well-established practices of, say, loving-kindness meditation, metta bhavana, and the conscious bringing to mind of other people, both those that we live with and are nearby, and also those who are far away, that we can bring those beings to mind and consciously wish those beings, wish them well, to wish them to be free from suffering, to extend our say positive thoughts and feelings towards them. So you're consciously bringing those people to mind. So that physically they might be separate, and just as nowadays people have lots of devices, their phones and TVs, computers, and such like, where they can have conversations with each other. You can have you can talk with each other. You can see each other from great distances. But I feel more important in a way than having those digital connections, having the mental connections where you're consciously bringing people to mind. So if there's a sense of separation and an alienation, a sense of loss, of not being able to be close to people, you can bring them to mind and say, well, even if they are far away or they're separate, that this is someone, this is a living being, that there's the feelings of kindness, compassion, and warmth, benevolence towards that person. So you're consciously bringing them into your awareness and generating that sense of positivity and acceptance in relationship to them. It might be that also you're living close to somebody that you prefer not to be living close to. That's another part of the issues that are coming up, for people kind of in their own homes and parents having to school their children at home. Apparently the divorce rate in China has gone up already because of all of the stay at home and be with your loved ones. Seriously, I'm kind of joking, but I'm not joking. But there's a sort of coronavirus divorce lawyer opportunities that are building up in the world, and people having to spend time with each other. Already, parents of sort of day one of homeschooling. There's like, I saw a notice in the news that one parent was saying, I think that all school teachers should be paid at least £1 million a year, or why are school teachers not all alcoholic? Just realizing the challenges of being at home and being close to your loved ones, can be demanding and difficult, and in a monastery as well. If we're living together, that not everybody that we live close to is nearby. Do we get on with easily, or perhaps they have attitudes or opinions or ways of functioning that we find challenging or difficult, hard to deal with. So I feel that in loving kindness, as Luang Por Sumedho would usually emphasize, just having that positive generating a positive sentiment towards others is a sort of stage one, or one aspect of loving kindness. But there's a receptive quality to metta as well, what I call a radical acceptance. And Luang Por Sumedho would phrase it, not dwelling in aversion. And so that can be, say, towards the people that we find challenging, the situations, the living situation that we find challenging, things that are bitter or difficult, things that are burdensome, to not dwell in aversion. Because as Luang Por Sumedho discovered when he first came to this country in the 1970s, if you talk too much about being positive and loving all beings and spreading loving kindness over the entire world, often people find that a bit sickly, or like, ugh, it's too sweet. It's a kind of yucky, sort of Walt Disney-ish attitude, what Luang Por would call thinking pink, and can bring out more aversion. I often mention how there was one of our friends in the the USA, actually ran a meditation day on the title "I Hate Metta." It's simply on the theme of people getting annoyed by being told to practice loving kindness. Like, as soon as they're told to love all beings, they get really annoyed and irritated. So I feel that that aspect of metta, of acceptance, and what Luang Por Sumedho would always emphasize, and this is so helpful, is we can have kindness towards things that we don't like, without any hypocrisy, without any kind of sugaring things over, without thinking pink. We don't have to hate things that we don't like. So some person or some aspect of the regime, the government stipulations that I don't want to sit 2 meters away from my friends. I refuse. I shan't. A kind of I won't do it kind of aversion and negativity. We can take that and say, well, this is the I shan't do it. I won't do it. You can't make me. So there. That's what that feeling is. It's a kind of ugly, childish reaction, a negative reaction. But we can accept that. So, well, this is the I shan't do it, you can't make me feeling. That's what this is. So to have acceptance for that, to have loving kindness for those negative, fearful, resentful emotions that arise within us, doesn't mean that we're pretending that they're beautiful or that we like them or that they're noble, but here they are. And so that's an aspect of Luang Por Sumedho's teaching, the way he would speak about metta. It's so helpful to really apply that moment by moment, to have that quality of a radical acceptance for your own mind states, your own fears, your own insecurities, your own aversions, your jealousies, your selfishness and laziness and so on. To accept, well, here it is, that's what this feels like. You're not pretending that it's beautiful or noble or good, but it's here. This is part of the natural order. And in terms of cultivating metta and living in bringing other beings to mind, the other beings of our own psychology, our own thoughts and emotions are very much a part of that. It's not just external beings, but it's those inner beings, those inner voices to be extending the quality of acceptance. Well, here it is. In this moment, it's like this. And that is extraordinarily skillful and helpful to work with our minds in that way. Another of the, in terms of how to relate when so many things are I say, dividing us, both physically dividing us from each other, but also there's psychological divisions. If somebody thinks, oh, well, we should go this way, and somebody else thinks we should go that way. This is right, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong. That kind of divisiveness, then it's helpful to see how much, when there is division, or criticism, blaming, complaining in the mind between yourself and others, to see how, again, this is something that Luang Por Sumedho would emphasize, how we create each other in our minds. We create, oh, this person is like this, she's this way, he's that way. We carry around a story about this particular person. This one we praise, and we think this person's really good, really admirable, really to be looked up to. And this person is a real idiot, they're a fool, they're annoying. Wow, why is she like that? I can't stand it. He's doing that again, I can't bear it. Why does he have to be that way? And we easily create people, carry them around in our mind. We create ourselves. We create judgments and the impressions about what we are like, usually self-critical, complaints and criticisms about how we are, self-aversion of various kinds. So, to practice metta on a more radical level, a more complete level, is to not create each other. So the most effective way of living harmoniously in a community is not to create anybody, not to create yourself, not to create the people around you. Because the more that I create you, and I say, oh, this person is this way, he's like this, she's like that, and then if I'm carrying around my image of you, then when we meet, I'm not really meeting you, I'm not really seeing you, I'm seeing my pre-scripted version of you. We we meet. We don't meet. We are just, in a sense, divided by the attachment to perceptions. So one of the things we can do is to actively use the quality of wise reflection. As we notice the flow of our thoughts, praising this person, criticizing that person, and so on and so forth, watching that, knowing that flow of thoughts and say, well, is that so? Is that the whole story? Is that a sure thing? Developing that a reflective attitude towards our own emotions, our opinions, our judgments, praise and criticism, like and dislike. And to my experience is that suddenly the world gets a lot more spacious. Rather than being hemmed in or frustrated or challenged by living with others, the world gets a lot more breezy, a lot more airy, a lot more spacious. So, next one. Many people are quarantined in their homes, in close quarters with others, with no end in sight. Please, can you offer some advice for dealing with others in such an intense situation? Well, I was talking about that. So, particularly for families that are in close quarters with each other, and the kids are not going off to school, people are not going out to work, and you're all there together in a place, but also in the monastery. We can be in close quarters with each other. So in the Metta Sutta, again, it's to do with using wise reflection, using our ability to imagine, to consider, to use our thinking and envisioning faculties as a human being. These are very important skills. So just as in the Metta Sutta, the Buddha says that even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. So particularly if you're feeling annoyed with some other person or frustrated or like, just took the last of the coffee or he's left the door open again, or why don't people clean up these surfaces? Can't they read notices? And these kind of small aversions that can bring very strong feelings. So then it's to use our imagination and to use that, the advice of the Buddha. So even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. So if you're feeling homicidal thoughts towards somebody who's left the sink all kind of wet or hasn't tidied up after themselves, or they've taken the last of the coffee again, that they say, well, this was my two-year-old child that I was feeling angry towards. This was, if I was the mother of this being and they were my child and they were like 1 year old or 2 years old, how would I feel? Would I be so angry? Would I be so enraged or have this indignation? And to use your imagination. So if this was my child, or this was my 98-year-old grandmother, if my 98-year-old granny had left the sink a bit dirty, would I be so upset with her? Well, no, because she's 98. How narrow-minded or reactive. So, but it's not my grandmother, it's him again. He did it again. But again, in the Buddha's advice, well, if this was your child, your only child, or your, say, beloved elder relative, how would you feel? And then what that does is when we step into that imaginary picture, oh, well, of course, that would be quite different. So it gives us a perspective on that reaction. It helps us to recognize that this person is another living being like we are. And so we find that we can create more of a space around each other. I often tell a story of how back here in the 1980s, during one of our winter retreats, and I think it was one of those really freezing cold winters, and we were using the retreat center shrine room as our meditation hall. This building didn't exist, and it was really freezing, so everyone needed to be indoors because it was icy cold and this vicious wind coming from Siberia. So the ground was covered in ice and snow, and it was really, really cold. So we were all kind of in one space together most of the day. And I think Luang Por could detect a certain amount of tension, friction between the members of the community, and sort of say various abrasions and conflict and stress, and also a kind of intensity, like people trying to practice and so on and so forth. And so Luang Por Sumedho being a very attentive and observant person, seeing that there's a lot of stress and friction and tension in the air, and also I think in the conversations he'd been having with various monks and nuns and people complaining about each other. And he gave this morning reflection one day about seeing each other not as personalities but as fields of merit. That they say, we wear these robes sewn in the patterns of the paddy fields of Magadha, and so that there's the way that the robes are sewn are in the form of fields, and we have this expression in the chanting, punya keta, field of merit. So rather than seeing each other as a personality, as a woman, as a man, as a monastic, as a layperson, as junior, as senior, or according to their personality types, that we approve of them, we disapprove of them, we like them, we dislike them, just to see you're surrounded by all these fields of merit. And you could tell. I was one of the people that nobody in that hall had for a moment thought about each other in that way ever. But you could feel there was a communal sense of, oh, wow, what a thought. So instead of thinking of each other in terms of names and age or gender or background or personality or anything, just surrounded by 40 or 50 fields of merit. Wow, what a thought. Yeah. And so that also reveals how, again, we create each other. We see each other in terms of personalities. That we kind of form, with the name goes this story and this history and this set of ideas or feelings. But when we say rejig the perceptions like that, and to say train the mind or use that capacity to imagine, to think and to reflect, to say, oh, I'm surrounded by all these fields of merit. We call them lay people or monastics, nuns, monks, lay women, laymen, and but yet instead we can think of each other just as fields of merit, and it changes the way that we are with each other, rather than just making judgments about personality and so on, and seeing each other just in those terms. But it makes it a very, very different story. By the way, I kind of arranged these questions a little bit, so we have some that relate to the coronavirus pandemic situation and some that are more general. So I've mixed them up a little bit so that they vary. So this is one of the more general ones. How should someone approach the search for a suitable spiritual teacher? Good question. And what comes to mind is, I would say, for a layperson in particular, like you would choose a restaurant or you choose a shoe shop. If you're hungry and you need something to eat, which restaurant do you choose? Or if you need a pair of shoes, then where do you go to look for shoes? So that because different, I don't think there's anyone who really believes that there will be one spiritual teacher that will be suitable for everybody. And different things suit different people, different styles, different ways of speaking, different modes of life. Different things suit different people. So just like with say, going to a restaurant or going to a shoe shop, then you first of all you get an initial impression that you like the sound of what that person says, or you hear one of their talks, or you see a book and you go, oh, that makes sense. So there's like an initial interest. So you see a restaurant, oh, that looks good. Generally, I've liked other places that look like that, or the kind of shoe shop that you used before. That okay, well, that looks like it's a place that might have the kind of thing that I'm after. So there's an initial impression. There's also the recommendation of your friends, people whose whose judgments you value. Say, oh, I went along to this Dhamma talk, or this is really great book, or I think this. I was reading this article by this person. I think it seemed that it would be something that would really interest you and it would really appeal to you. So I thought I'd pass that on. Do you take a look? So the recommendations of our trusted friends. And so, like someone says, "Oh, this is a great restaurant. I've got to take you there." Or this is a great shoe shop. I think this has got just the kind of thing you're looking for. So I think it's the same with spiritual teachers. That you have an initial impression, you have advice of trusted friends, kalyana mitta. But then the main thing is to try it out. Go into the shoe shop and see what they got. Put them on your feet and see if they actually fit. Or go to the restaurant and actually order some of the food and taste it. So that there isn't really any other a more reliable way of judging than to actually, with a spiritual teacher, listen to what they've got to say, read their words, follow their advice, put it into practice, and see, does it help you? What's the result of following their advice, following their example? Okay, it looks like a good restaurant and the menu looks great, but what does it taste like? Did it make you ill? What was the result of that? The shoes you've got, okay, they look good. They were a good price, but they seem to fit in the shop. How do they work? Do they actually do the job that they're needed for? What's the result? So, and I say this kind of thing over and over and over again, that you can't generalize, particularly when people say, "What kind of practice should I be doing?" or "What's the right meditation?" What sort of teaching do you recommend for me? And I'll always say, well, just try things out and see what the result is. Ultimately, there's no substitute for that, because different things suit different people. And I say, well, what's the right size shoe? Or what are the right glasses to wear if you need glasses? What's the right food? Well, it's not fixed. It's going to depend on the time, the place, the situation, and each individual. So it's impossible to generalize. And really, that experimenting and seeing what the result is, that's the only thing that you can trust. So that leads on very neatly to the next question, which is, how do I know that my Dhamma practice is going in the right way? I mean that I'm really improving. Thank you. Again, there's no substitute for watching your mind, and the only really reliable measure, I would say, is dukkha and the ending of dukkha. That because we can pick up a particular practice or a style of working with our mind, or a routine, or some particular method, and it can look great on paper, or we can be impressed, or someone said this was really good, or the Ajahn said this is so wonderful, and gets these kind of great results from it. But ultimately, just like going to the restaurant or trying the shoes on, try it out, and does it reduce dukkha? Does it increase dukkha? What's the result of it? And that's not always easy to tell. To say, well, am I improving? To use the reflective ability, the quality of Dhamma Vichaya investigation. Say, okay, well, is this really reducing the dukkha in my life? Is this really making a quality of peacefulness more tangible, more consistent? Is this making it easier for me to get on with people? Is this making it easier for me to adapt to different situations? Am I becoming more fragile, more confused, more agitated? Or am I finding myself more adaptable, more, say, at ease in different situations? Am I more peaceful and clear in my mind? Am I more able to be helpful to others, or am I becoming more alienated, more insecure, more fragile, more confused, and so forth. So there needs to be that quality of investigation, like an active exploring. What is the result of this? And the Pali word for that exploring, you can say yoniso manasikara, wise reflection. Or another word that particularly applies to this is vimamsa. So it's not a very commonly used word in Pali. Vimamsa, V-I-M-A-M with a dot, S-A, vimamsa. And it means that's looking at the results of what you've been doing. So that having taken some particular path, it's that sense, okay, well, I followed this path. Did I get where I wanted to go? I was going to walk to Little Gadsden Church. Did I get there? Yeah. Am I on the right track? Does it look? Can I see the church in the distance? What's the result? Did I arrive where I wanted to go? So that vimamsa is that's exploring and seeing what the results are of the actions that you've taken, and then being guided by that, and also with respect to whether you're really improving or not. Another source of say useful advice is your friends, your kalyana mitta. That we might think I'm not really getting anywhere, or this is the practice isn't really working for me, or like I've been putting in a lot of effort, but it doesn't seem like there's any real change. Ask your friends, and it's not uncommon that the people who are with you can actually see the changes in you far better than you can for yourself. So frequently, if you check in with your kalyana mitta, people around you, people who are close to you, people who know you well, and they'll say, "Oh, well, you're way different than you were 3 years ago." Your things are really different. You handle situations very, very differently now than you used to. And the Buddha gave a very interesting example, with exactly this question. He said, when someone says, "How do I know if I'm improving, or how do I know if things are getting better? I don't seem to change much over time." And the Buddha said, it's like a carpenter. If a carpenter gets a new tool, like a saw, and then they use that saw to work with every day for 5 years, and after 5 years have gone by, then their fingerprints are worn into the handle of the saw, and they look at the handle, and it precisely fits their own hand. They can see the imprint of their fingers, their thumb in the handle of the saw. He said, you can't say one day to the next exactly how much of the handle has been worn away each day, but after 5 years, then there's the very visible, tangible imprint of the hand is there. So that was an example that the Buddha used to say, you can't really tell one day to the next how much improvement is being made, how many kilesas are being abandoned, how many good qualities are being developed. But with a steadiness and a consistency, then those changes are coming about. And often, if we just use our own memory and look back and consider, okay, well, 5 years ago, how would I have handled being praised, or things going in a very positive direction? How would I have handled being criticized, or things going in a very painful direction? What was the mind doing with that then, or 10 years ago? And how does the mind relate to that now? How do I deal with gain and loss, praise and criticism, comfort and discomfort, and so forth? And then we can use our own memory to assess that. But often it's our friends, it's our companions in the spiritual life, the people who are living with us, who are able to give us, in a way, reliable feedback. In my experience, anyway. So it's another more general. There's a few questions here, a few general things. Could you focus the meaning of rituals and the difference between rituals and superstition? For example, why walking around the stupa from left to right and not from right to left? Well, it depends on which tradition. If you're a Buddhist and if it's for a blessing, then you go around clockwise, sunwise, as they say. If it's for a funeral, then you go around anti-clockwise. In Tibet, the Buddhists circumambulate clockwise, but the Bonpos circumambulate anti-clockwise. So when I was walking around Mount Kailash, you'd occasionally meet some people, some Tibetans coming in the opposite direction, and they were the Bonpos. So the sort of pre-Buddhist or early Buddhist forms of religion in Tibet, the Bonpo. So any ritual in and of itself is only a collection of sankharas. The form of a Buddha image, the way that we bow, the way we shake hands, the way people now shake hands with their elbows. It's a new ritual. People bump elbows now. It's a newly formed greeting. That any ritual, it can only be a set of sankharas. It's just perceptions. And so that one of the great insights of the Buddha and his efforts in his teaching was going against the degree of superstition and the kind of rigid customs of India of his time. And so that the idea that a ritual or a form has some kind of intrinsic liberating quality, or some automatically brings a kind of blessing. Like as soon as the food leaves your hand and drops into the bowl of the samana, merit is created as the piece of food hits the bottom of the bowl. I would say that's superstition. But looking at the mind states, the qualities of wanting to be generous, caring for others, respecting the triple gem, receiving the offering with gratitude and appreciation. There are wholesome mind states that are created by the donor, by the recipient in that exchange, and so there is benefit and blessing being created. But in and of themselves, any kind of form, whether you walk around the stupa clockwise or anti-clockwise, or you just sit and look at the stupa, there's no intrinsic value. Different customs grow up in different places. The way that you get on a horse, for example. So that I grew up riding ponies and horses. So you always get on a horse from what's called the near side. So if you're sitting on top of the horse, it'll be your left. So you always get on a horse from what's called the near side. You never get on from the right. You always get on from the left, and that's how you do it. That's how you get on a horse. Of course, it's physically possible to get on a horse from the other side, but one doesn't do that. And then when you ask, why do we always get on from this side? Nobody really knows. At least the people you'd ask when you were a child, why do we always have to get on this side? What do you just do? It's a custom. But apparently it began because of wearing swords. That's how the people who were sword-wearing types, the way they got on a horse from that side, then they wouldn't get their sword tangled. But it becomes the way you do it. It's like when people shake hands, or when they used to shake hands. So it's right hand to right hand, it's not left hand to left hand. That's the way you do it. But there's, in themselves, they're just empty sankharas that have no particular special value, meaning. What is a living being in Buddhism? Is a plant a living being or not? Well, technically, plants are called one-facultated life, so they are alive, but they're not classed as a bhuta or a satta, a living being. So you do get instances where you have, say, large trees which have a devata living in them, which are which are spoken of from time to time in the teachings. But technically, a plant is not a satta. It's got one facultated life, is what they're technically called. Exactly what that might mean, or whether that means whether they have consciousness or not, you can discover for yourselves. But according to the teachings, so plants are considered to be alive, but they have one faculty rather, and they're not considered to have consciousness in the way that the animal life does. And the last one of these, again, a somewhat theoretical question: is the body considered the palace of the consciousness in Theravada Buddhism, as in Mahayana traditions, or not? the palace of consciousness. So that's much more of a sort of Mahayana kind of term. Certainly, the way it's spoken about, you have nama and rupa. You have the physical form, and which is rupa, and then nama is the mental faculties that go along with it. But it's also say considered or understood that the mind doesn't have to have a body in order for there to be a living being. So, like you have whole in Buddhist cosmology, you have whole regions of heavenly realms where the formless beings live. They have mind but no body. They are arupa. So in these higher Brahma realms, so you can be a living being but have no body, not have a material or physical body, even of a subtle kind. But they're arupa. So that the body is not considered to be a palace of consciousness, but certainly within the human realm, then it's understood that the mind and body, the five khandhas, the rupa khandha and the nama khandhas, they are related to each other, but it's not spoken about in such a kind of grand way. It's more like so the natural relationship of the mental and the physical. They function together, and it's recognized that in the human realm, for the body needs to be alive in order for the mind to function, but also that the human realm is not the only realm that is say to be considered, and that there can be beings that have nama khandhas and no rupa. So, the recognition of impermanence is sometimes described as peaceful and a source of joy. For example, in Anicca Vata Sankhara, or in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 137, described as the joy based on renunciation. But in most passages, impermanence is mentioned as a key source of suffering. For example, in the Anatalakkhana Sutta. Would it be possible for you to comment on the difference between the two and how one could turn the reality of impermanence around for oneself so that it becomes a source of joy rather than of suffering? Well, there's two aspects to this. Firstly, if impermanence is seen through the eye of ignorance, if the mind is clouded by avijja, by not seeing clearly, then anicca is a source, that the quality of change is a source of suffering. Either there's something that you like that is changing and you're losing it, or there's something that you dislike and you're afraid that it's not going to go away, that it's going to stay on. So if the mind is affected by ignorance, then the quality of change is very likely to produce suffering, either immediately or in the near future. So that's one aspect of it. If the quality of change is seen with vijja, with awareness, with wisdom, then it has a liberating and a pacifying quality. Because with the quality of vijja, with awareness, then it's realized, well, there is no thing that can be owned. There is no person that can do any owning. That these idea of a me who owns something and a thing which is owned, these are just superficial impressions. That there's nothing really substantial there. So the fact that things are changing, they're a constant state of flux and can't be owned and controlled, well, it's always been that way. So the heart is not burdened by that or limited by it or stressed by that in any way. Also, someone was asking this question the other day about the positive aspects of anicca. Another of the qualities of anicca that is extremely positive is that we can change. That your mind is changeable. That's why there is a path that the Buddha's teaching describes, that the mind is changeable. The mind can be trained. The mind can be liberated. That changeability is great news. You know, if it wasn't for that quality of anicca, so in a way, the positive side of anicca is the whole of the Eightfold Path. That you can train your views, your thoughts, your speech, your actions, your livelihood, your you can train the way you make effort, the way the mind concentrates. So you can train the mind to be mindful. So that whole trainability and the results of that training, the workability of the heart, the mind, that's the extremely positive and beneficial aspects of anicca. And so that that capacity or potential for change is something that is to be rejoiced in. You know, so that we might dwell upon an idea like, oh, but I'm really stuck. I can't change this. I've always been this way. I'm never going to get out of this. But the fact of anicca is that, well, all things are impermanent, and that the path hasn't gone away. It's like when Ananda is weeping at the Parinibbana, the Buddha's about to breathe his last, and Ananda is weeping, and the Buddha said to Ananda, with the passing away of the Tathagata, will the Eightfold Path disappear? No. You know, he said, well. So why are you crying? You know, that okay, the Tathagata is going to pass away, but you know, what's there to weep over? The path isn't disappearing. The potential for you to awaken is still there. So dry your tears. Okay, so going back to coronavirus. Dear Ajahn, news about palliative care doctors urging people to have a conversation about what they would want if they or their loved ones became seriously unwell with coronavirus. There's also news from doctors treating patients in Italy who are reflecting this is the disease where you die alone. No family members can be with you. Now, as much as ever, there is a need for people to learn how to die well. Perhaps some help along these lines would be extremely important, drawing on the death and dying retreats you have had at Amaravati in the past. So I've had here in the temple these during a couple of these death and dying retreats, what I call a death rehearsal meditation. So we have people lying down on the floor, men on this side, women on this side, and I would give a guided meditation about imagining this being the last 45 minutes or so of one's life. And so those death rehearsal meditations have been quite strangely popular and impactful. So I've done this, actually I did it in Thailand in December. I did one of these, I led in a similar way. And we won't have that death rehearsal itself now, but I'll share with you what I do, what I particularly focus on in these death rehearsals. And in terms of dying well, because none of us know if this bug might arrive, if our bodies might fade between now and the next couple of weeks or whenever. But there are 4 particular things I encourage people to focus on. So with these meditations, I say, okay, this is the last 45 minutes of one's life. And when the bell goes, that's the last breath is at that point. So this is the closing of one's life. And so it's using the imagination. And as they're considering, okay, if this is the last few minutes of my life, what I want to be bringing attention to. So the 4 things are, first of all, to bring to mind the people and the events of your life that you have resentment for, the grudges that you have, the people who did you wrong, who treated you badly, that caused you harm or caused others harm in the world, that sense of real, aversion or indignation, that sense of, well, patika is the Pali word, the grudge bearing resentment. To bring those people, those events to mind, whether people in your family or people in the public arena, political leaders or whoever it might be, that you're still carrying around, and to let that be considered. Okay, this is the last few minutes of my life. Do I want to still be carrying that people around? Do I want to carry that desire for vengeance to the end, or can I forgive? You're not pretending that what they did was good, or that you're pleased with it, but you're not ready to. You're now ready to let go of that, to not carry that around, to recognize that people are foolish, people are driven by greed, hatred, and delusion. They make terrible mistakes, and so this was one of them. They had these painful results. So to bring to mind those grudges and aversions, and to encourage the heart to forgive, to let go. And the second thing I like to encourage, again with respect to others, is the people that you are grateful for. Your parents, your loved ones, your school teachers, your spiritual teachers, people close to you in your family, or people who are in society. Again, significant teachers or leaders, people who have meant a lot to you. To consciously cultivate a sense of gratitude. I was really benefited. It's so amazing. I was lucky to be born in the world in a time when the Buddha's teaching existed, or I had this great opportunity to hear the teachings, or my mother was such an incredible person, or my brother just saved my life so many times. To consciously cultivate that sense of gratitude, and not with a sense of debt or feeling, that you've got to carry that person around, but that appreciating the goodness that you were the recipient of, and acknowledging that, cultivating that sense of gratitude and appreciation, and to let that be fully known. But again, to appreciate that, but also to let that go, to not be carrying that around as a debt or something that has to go with you, but just to let the heart be brightened by that, but without attachment. Then the third thing is to look at your own actions and to go through the list of things that you regret, the kind of cruelties that you are responsible for, acts that you did that were harmful, destructive, selfish, that maybe you didn't mean to cause harm, but you did. Maybe you were reacting in an aggressive or violent way, and you caused pain and difficulty for others. And again, to acknowledge that, to feel the painfulness of that, but also to forgive, to recognize, well, I was 17 at the time, so of course it's understandable. I was stupid, I was drunk, and it was an ignorant and a foolish thing to have done. And so you're acknowledging that, and forgiving yourself for your own shortcomings, and letting those in, letting those be known, and letting them go. And the last one, which is often the most challenging, is to recollect your own goodness, the good things that you have done, and to be bringing into consciousness. And in the West, in particular, we get schooled to not be proud, or not to be inflated or egotistical, and you shouldn't be inflated about the good things that you've done, and be sort of swaggering. But the Buddha encouraged this practice of what he called chaganusati, to reflect upon your own goodness, not to be inflated or conceited, but say, that was a beautiful thing that was done. That was. I'm glad I did that. That was something that was noble. It was helpful. People really appreciated that. I'm glad I did that. Yes. And one way you can tell whether it's praiseworthy is if somebody else had done it, you'd be very happy to acknowledge and appreciate it. Because it's me that's done it, then we think, oh, we shouldn't get so sort of swollen and prideful about that. But the Buddha encouraged this as a liberating practice, chaganusati, to recollect your own goodness, the brightness of the heart that comes from meritorious and noble acts. So then those are the four particular things that I bring to mind. And then the last thing that I feel in terms of dying well, the advice when the Buddha's relative Mahanama, who was the ruler of the Sakyans, came to the Buddha and said, I sometimes get invited to people's bedsides as they're dying, and I'm supposed to give advice, and I don't really know what to say. what kind of advice should I give to the dying when I'm asked to do that? And then the Buddha gives this sequence of advice. Again, it can seem a little bit harsh or a bit unsentimental, but he says, well, if you're with someone who's dying, you say, are you worried about your family and your home? And if they say yes, you say, well, whether you worry about your family or you don't worry about your family, you're going to die anyway. So better for you to stop worrying about your family. Are you worried about your business and your possessions? So yes, I am actually. Well, whether you worry about your business and your possessions or you don't, you're going to die anyway. So it's best for you to forget about them, let go of them. So that can seem a little bit harsh. So again, you have to choose the words carefully. You do give that advice, but then after encouraging letting go of the family, the possessions, and then one's status and so on, he then says, then encourage them to focus their mind on being reborn in a wholesome state, in a heavenly realm. And then he goes through from the heaven of the four guardian deities. He said, well, why settle for being reborn in the heaven of the four guardian deities? Why not be reborn in the Tavatimsa heaven? Why settle for the Tavatimsa heaven? Why not aim for the Tusita heaven? Why settle for that? Why not aim for the Brahma world? It goes up through a long sequence of encouraging to aim at a higher and more sort of bright and spacious, luminous realms. He said, finally, you should say, well, why settle for being reborn in a Brahma realm? Instead, it'd be much more skillful to focus your attention on Sakkaya Nirodha, the cessation of identity. He said, and then the Buddha makes a very interesting comment at that point. He says, and one who focuses the mind on and realizes that quality of Sakkaya Nirodha, there is no difference between that person, their state of mind, and one who's been an arahant for 100 years, a bhikkhu who's been an arahant for 100 years. So it's one of the very few places in the suttas where the Buddha talks about a layperson being fully enlightened, if not the only place. there might be one or two others, but so a layperson on their deathbed, that letting go of identity, of that sort of shedding all those, the desire to be a being born any place, in any way, shape, or form, and freeing the heart from those even subtle kinds of craving, even for the sort of refined and exalted higher realms. So this is the way to really purify and liberate the heart completely. And so, in terms of advice for the dying, the short version is let go of everything. Just whatever it is, let go of it, and let go, and that's the degree to which anyone can genuinely let go and free the heart from all cravings and aversions and identifications, and that's the best advice that we can give to the dying and for ourselves when that moment comes. So I will leave it there for this evening. It's getting a little bit chilly in the temple, so those who are sitting out in the cloister probably even colder. So offer these thoughts for consideration, and we can close with the sharing of blessings. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss, and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled.